Make your choices a whole lot smarter. We've got you covered on Acro Drive. Now enjoy this video.
KTM, a brand who's built its heritage on off-road prowess and is currently facing its most challenging moment with all of the financial crisis that has been going on. And at the time of recording this video, we don't quite know what exactly the future holds. But as soon as this video goes live and as you are watching it, we shall know more about the same. But until now, for India, our taste of the off-road pedigree from KTM has been barely anything, because the 390 Adventure until now, well, that is a little bit of a jacked up Duke with slightly more travel and a longer footprint, which means at best it was a fast tourer which could take on, say, barely gravel roads. But this, the new 390 Adventure, is bigger, meaner, more purposeful, and at the same time more accessible and forgiving for all kinds of riders. And this has the potential to be the new segment benchmark. You can clearly see that this 390 Adventure means business, because it is sort of a derivative in terms of design language from KTM's Dakar Rally winning bike, the 450 Rally. And for that front, you get the high-rise beak, this tall windshield, this rally tower style setup over here, and even as you continue, the same rally fender sort of setup, the fairing, and all this flat seat. This all gives you the feeling that this is more purposeful in that sense. But this seat height, well, it's reduced from the previous bike. The previous bike was 855, this is now 830 mm. And it's very narrow, so getting your feet down on the ground is rather easier for, say, even shorter riders. Now, I am 5 feet 9 inches tall and I can easily flat foot, say, both of the balls of 5 feet, and I'm going to show that to you. So, yeah, easier said than done. But this reduction in seat height hasn't come at the cost of reduction in ground clearance as well, because the ground clearance, in fact, has gone up by a good 30 mm or so. And further on, you get a proper 21-inch front, 70-inch rear, tubeless spoke wheel setup with good 50-50 bias dual purpose tires. And furthermore, this gets proper off-road mode, where you can switch off the traction control, switch off the rear ABS, and just let it slip. On the quality front, KTM has upped its game big time, and this is a world-class product. The bike is put together neatly, everything looks top-notch. And while I don't personally like the graphics too much, they have been applied onto the fairing using a pigmented polypropylene technology, which simply means that in the event of a crash, the livery will not be damaged as the color is deeply embedded into the plastics. So it has all the makings of a great adventure tourer. So let's just split this review into 3 parts. How does it do the sensible daily business? How does it do the touring business? And how does it do the off-road business? When we talk about the sensibility business, well, we were riding this bike mainly in the streets and nearby, say, narrow lanes of Goa. So where the engine on the earlier bike was stressed, but this is the same 399cc motor from the Duke. And as we found out on the Naked, that motor was very versatile, and so is this. And in fact, for the Adventure, KTM has provided a softer throttle response for, say, the street mode. So what it does is, it dulls down the throttle response just marginally so that it is fairly accessible and easier to use on an everyday riding basis. It doesn't feel quite as manic, quite as mental, and this also will translate better for touring, but we'll come to that in a little while. Furthermore, they've optimized the quick shifter on the 390 Adventure. Already the Duke's quick shifter was way better than the previous bikes or the previous 373 engines. Now this bike is still a notch better, than the Dukes. Even though it's become longer and heavier, it doesn't make its weight show. It isn't quite as apparent because the posture on this bike is fairly upright and it's very easy to maneuver it through the traffic. The 21-inch front wheel does show its slight vagueness at the start, but once you start trusting the rubber, once you start trusting the front end, it is very light and very flickable and very maneuverable through the city. And all of this is a joy because the old 390 Adventure, the 373 engine was a pain. You had to consistently shift the gearbox. You had to work the bike in order for it to go. This bike, you can leave it in say third and fourth gear and ride it in city. And another thing that's helping here is that KTM has introduced a crawl functionality. Now this isn't something new. We've already seen on certain TVS bikes, which is called glide through technology, and even Suzuki motorcycles, where it sort of makes sure that the engine revs don't dial down or don't drop below 2000 RPM. So ideally it keeps the engine revs over there, and so you can say continue along, you can chug along without necessarily say slipping the clutch or say working the gearbox as much. So sensibility wise, this is leagues better than the old bike. Now the older 390 Adventure was already a great fast tourer, and this one is sort of similar, but where this one is a marked improvement over the other is the suspension department. So this motor can easily sit at speeds in excess of 100 kmph, but the way that this bike's the suspension is tuned and it's set up is that on the older bike you would have to say slow down for any bumps or say any road undulations that came in your path. Here you can take them with ease. It's not like it's very sophisticated and very plush or flat like the Himalayans, but still this is very close to that setup. And furthermore, you also get adjustability, compression and rebound at the front, rebound and preload at the rear. So you can tune the bike settings to your liking and find a nice setup for touring. And this is great because another thing that you get over here is cruise control. This is the only say sub 500cc ADV to get cruise control in the market, and it's tuned and calibrated very well. You get a button here to engage cruise control, you get a plus switch for the thumb, you get a minus switch for the index finger, and you can set the speeds accordingly. And figuring out cruise control is very easy, and it takes the stress away when you have miles and miles to ride on a single day. Where this bike we feel that should have been better, and especially it comes here in terms of touring, is that the fuel tank capacity over here, well, it is 14.5 liters, which is 1 liter more than the older bike, but this is still half liter less than the new 390 Duke. I mean, we had hoped that this at least would have gotten a 17 liter fuel tank, and if we were to equate the same Duke's fuel efficiency number that we consistently get, which is around 25 kmpl when you are riding hard, and the KTM is meant to be ridden hard, well, you are not getting as much range over the Duke. So technically your say runs or your highway states are going to be more or less the same. We had hoped that this would be better, but hey, there is an advantage to having this say reasonable amount of fuel tank, and that comes in off-roading. Despite the longer wheelbase, the 390 Adventure still feels very eager to please in the twisties. It's reasonably sharp and very light to throw it around in the bends and be a hooligan. The Apollo Trampler X tires hold up rather well on tarmac, allowing the rider to carry some serious lean angles. And don't let the spec sheet fool you, because even though on paper it might not have a radial front brake caliper, the system works brilliantly. The bite is not too sharp as it needs to do with bidding off tarmac as well. And as far as off-roading ability goes, this feels like a proper KTM off-road machine because it's got more capabilities, it's got more suspension travel, it's got the right spread of power that sort of helps you go fast and also keeps you in check. And say you have an off-road dedicated mode where the throttle response is sharpened. It's not manic still, it's not mental yet, and we wish that there was another additional, say, Kida mode, if you were to say that, where you would get, say, the entire mentalness that is possessed in this engine which we found on the Duke, which is sort of lacking over here. But having said that, in off-road mode, this bike takes on everything in its path with finesse. Yes, it's still not quite as plush as the Himalayan, but what it is able to do is that it gives you better sense of confidence when you're taking on, say, rocky boulders, or when you're taking on major jumps. One thing that we did find is that the stock suspension tune, when you keep it at the mid levels of the compression and rebound on the USD fork as well as the rebound on the monoshock, is that the suspension tends to bottom out when you're going fast and you're taking big jumps. But I am a 100 kilo rider, the riding gear weighs a little more, and when I'm taking those jumps, I should have, say, tuned the suspension to my body weight and all. But we'll get to that once we get this bike for a proper road test and, say, even a comparison. But this bike gives me the confidence to take on anything in its path, and even when we are going down, say, some rocky, steep trails or powering through, say, tight, tricky sections, this felt natural. Now, this will surely give a lot more, say, impetus and a lot more, say, courage to newer riders who want to get into the world of off-road riding. So, as such, this bike certainly impresses when you're going off-roading. So, 3.67 lakh rupees, which is, say, roughly a few thousand rupees more than the older SW variant of the Adventure. And for that pricing, KTM has totally smashed it out of the park. And there is also a more affordable yet a not compromised version of this bike, the 390 Adventure. The video, you can check it out, our first look video of that bike is already live on the channel. So, is this the new segment benchmark? Well, we certainly think so, because it does all the things that you want from an adventure motorcycle very, very well. The Himalayan, well, it's a great tourer. The Scrambler, even though it's not an adventure, it does the sensibility business very well, and it does a light off-roading. The GS, well, you know that there is a new one coming out very soon. And TBS, well, we don't know quite as yet. But this stands very solid, say, as a great benchmark for others to, say, come up to. But if we had to suggest, if you're not, say, somebody who's very keen on off-road riding and you wanted a motorcycle that is purely based on, say, adventure touring, so you could take on a little bit of the bad stuff, but you are primarily going to be focused on adventure riding, or, say, long hours in the saddle going from distance A to B, well, you should check out the Adventure X, because that gets alloy wheels, those get the same sort of suspension travel and tires. It's not compromising on any sort of the electronics. The only thing missing are the riding modes and, say, traction control system. And in that sense, that is virtually the same bike, but at 76,500 rupees less. So KTM says that they've got 800 bookings of this bike. And I think that while booking time, we don't know which of the versions they've got it, I certainly feel that there will be a lot more takers for the X than the standard. And in case if you're wondering whether or not the R will come, well, that is a matter of just homologation for our laws and if there is demand for it in India. But for 90% of the audience who wants an off-road machine which is capable of going touring, this fits the bill perfectly. So as it stands, the 390 Adventure is a marked improvement, and yes, this is the new segment benchmark. And I know you want us to compare this bike with the Himalayan, but you'll have to wait for our comparison video to come. But until then, do us a favor. What exactly are the areas that you're looking forward to in the comparison? Mention them to us in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notification icon, and stay tuned for more updates. And before I end, always wear proper riding gear on all your rides. And I am still going to go and have a bit more fun on the 390 Adventure. Thank you so much for watching.
everything car and everything bike. We got you. Here on Acco Drive, our expertise for your ease.